Okay, we're ready to start, so thanks everybody. Apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillors Nielsen and Owenson.
And could I ask any members who've got a declaration of disclosable or pecuniary interest to declare, please? Councillor Rain.
Works pretty good tonight, thank you. Yes, I need to declare that I chair the National Landscapes Joint Advisory Committee, the JAC, which I know the body has submitted representations on this application.
Okay, thank you. Other declarations? Councillor?
Yeah, just I'm a member of the Malvern Hills Trust, and I know they've also, I think they're going to speak maybe or submit an application.
Me too.
Comments.
NHT also.
Oh, you're double-hatted. Thank you, John. Councillor?
I'm also on the Malvern Hills Trust.
Councillor Bennett?
Et moi.
Thank you. I think that's everybody now. So, confirmation of the minutes of the previous meeting. I'll call for a proposer and a seconder. Anybody want to propose? Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. Seconder? Councillor Allen. Thank you. Okay, Chair's announcements. I'll introduce the officers in attendance. We've got Kieran Power, Head of Development Management, very far to my left. We've got Claire Ball, Development Manager, who'll be presenting tonight on the application. We've got Jenny Ager, Legal Representative, on my right, and further to my right, we've got Alison Freeman, who's representing Democratic Services tonight. I'd like to thank Jenny, where's Jenny gone, for chairing last meeting, which I couldn't make. Thank you for doing it. I gather you did a brilliant job, so you're not let off the hook. Thank you very much. And could I welcome all the members of the public who are in the room as well. Thank you for turning up on a grotty night. Okay, so we haven't got an update sheet, so we're going to go straight on to the application and Claire's presentation.
There is an update sheet.
Oh, sorry, where's that?
It was sent out though.
Oh, it was sent out. Oh, we have got an update sheet. Beg your pardon. We have got an update sheet. Beg your pardon. Right. So have all members read the update sheet? Okay, thank you. And also, I'll say that we had a site visit yesterday, some of us to the site, so we had a good walk round. Luckily, it didn't rain too much. Okay, so Claire, would you like to introduce the application for us? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of verbal updates as well. So firstly, the committee report in the recommendations section, which is section 8, sets out within point 2 that following satisfactory resolution of point 1, completion of a planning obligation section 106 agreement securing contributions as set out in section 7.12 should actually refer to section 7.9, so that's just a typo. Also, in regards to the update sheet which was published yesterday, it referred to 40 affordable dwellings when this should have been 40% affordable dwellings, which actually equates to 80 dwellings. And then a further update is the inclusion of a further condition. And this relates to white-clawed crayfish, and this is following clarification from our Heritage and Biodiversity Officer. So the condition we're recommended in addition to what's on the report is that no development should take place until a scheme for the protection and or mitigation of white-clawed crayfish, a protected species under the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 as amended, is submitted to and agreed in writing by the local planning authority. The scheme shall include measures to avoid and mitigate the impact upon associated habitat during construction works and post-construction on a white-clawed crayfish protection plan, which shall be carried out in accordance with a timetable for implementation as approved. And the reason is to ensure compliance with the Wildlife and Countryside Act 1981 as amended, and the Conservation of Habitats and Species Regulations 2017, minimise impacts on and enhance white-clawed crayfish and its habitat in accordance with local policy SWDP 22, SWDPR 27 and MPPF paragraphs 180 and 186. And the reason really for this condition is that white-clawed crayfish are very rare in Worcestershire, and the Careys and Whippets Brook, which is close to the site, the catchments are among the last known location of this species in the county. Okay, so I'll get on to the presentation. So the application is an outline planning application with all matters reserved except for the formation of an access from Sayers Avenue for up to 200 dwellings, use class C3, including the provision of affordable homes, new pedestrian connections, internal roads, parking, open space including landscaping, an area for play, surface water drainage and other supporting infrastructure, including utilities and engineering works and groundworks. So this is an outline application. So the matters for consideration primarily are the principle of development and the access, which is one of the matters which is set, which is not reserved for reserved matters. Okay, so this is the site location plan. It's around 12.7 hectares. It was put forward as an emerging allocation for the plan review, the SWDPR, and it's been accepted as an allocation going forward in the plan review under emerging policy SWDPR 55. As part of the call for sites are larger as originally put forward, and now it's been reduced, and it's been reduced in number from 400 dwellings to 200. So this is being put forward as part of the plan review, which is due for examination early next year. Here's just an aerial image of the site. It shows that it's agricultural land. It's to the west of Malvern Vale, the north of Sayers Avenue and Broadlands Drive. It includes hedgerows, which you can see on the aerial view, along the boundaries and within the inner boundaries, which because I think it's about 4 parcels of land. Here's just a map showing the broader context of the site in Malvern. It's around 2 kilometres to the north of the town centre. I think there we go. It's enclosed by development to the north, south and east. Okay, so this just shows the main constraints for consideration as part of this scheme. So there's public rights of way which run along the eastern and western boundary. One of those leads to the Worcestershire Way. Whippets Brook, which is a special local wildlife site, is to the north. This is where the white-clawed crayfish have been found. Mill Coppice local wildlife site is to the west. The pink shown is the Malvern Hills National Landscape. At its closest, it's about 300 metres distant from the site. There is a black line which shows that the site is adjacent to the development boundary for Malvern as defined in the SWDP. And there's Malvern Hills Triple SI also to the south, which is at about 550 metres distance. So this plan is, it's actually a plan that, although this is an outline application, we can approve this plan as a plan to be broadly in accordance for any reserved matters coming forward in future. This shows that the development proposal includes 50% green infrastructure, and this is more than that's required from either the SWDP or the emerging plan or in the emerging policy relating to this site. So the requirement was 40%, but there's 50% proposed, and this is part to mitigate the landscape visual impacts. And if you can just see it's proposed to retain a lot of the hedgerows which are existing in the site. It's shown by the green and the trees in the site. The main loss of hedgerow and trees will be along Sayers Avenue to the south, where the new proposed access will be, and where it's proposed to widen Sayers Avenue. There's proposed to be some attenuation basins for surface water drainage, so that water can be captured on site and released at greenfield rates. And there's a proposed play area and lots of some landscape planting as well. So this is a plan that we can secure for any future development reserve matters to accord with broadly. Here's the existing access, which is off Broadlands Drive, where it meets Belmont Road. The new access would be located along this stretch of Sayers Avenue, and it's proposed to widen Sayers Avenue to provide a shared cycle and pedestrian path. So here's just a bit more detail. The hedgerow and trees would be removed to widen the Sayers Avenue. There would be a change in priority from Archers Close and Broadlands Drive here at the bottom, where there'd be 2 new give-way sections, which would encourage traffic to flow into the site. There would also be some traffic calming measures around the entrance to where Broadlands Drive is, and Belmont Road, just to try and discourage people from using it as a cut through. Here's an illustrative master plan. This shows what the site could look like being developed. It's not a plan for approval, but it can just give you an idea of what's proposed, and you can see that it does include green infrastructure, public open space to the west of the site, and attenuation basins to the east, which provides some separation between Malvern Vale. And this is the landscape mitigation strategy submitted by the applicant. Again, this is a plan that we can secure any future applications to be broadly in accordance with. And it shows that much of the internal hedgerows will be retained, and the areas where it will remain green infrastructure and public open space. And there's just some images of the site. So this is the existing access, which would be blocked off, and part of the hedgerows along here would be removed to accommodate the widened road. Here's again Sayers Avenue, where the section of hedgerow against the road would be removed. And here's a view looking northeast from Broadlands Drive. Just gives you an idea of the topography. It does slope down towards Malvern Vale. And Broadlands Drive here is an unmade road that's not adopted. So here's some just views looking southeast from Broadlands Drive, just to give you an idea of the type of development on the edge of the site. And this is a view from Malvern Vale from Biggin Close. The areas adjacent to the site, as shown on the plan, will be generally accommodating green infrastructure and attenuation basins. Again, here's a view from Sugarloaf and Hollybush Close towards the site, and again there's separation provided on the development plan for for approval, which shows there would be some separation. And this is view from End Hill. It's a key viewpoint which is graded as exceptional in the Malvern Town Neighbourhood Plan. So the plan seeks to protect these views, and this just gives an idea of how the development could be viewed from the site. So the dashed line indicates the parcels of land affected, subject to this application, with the nearest parcel of land would be mainly green infrastructure, and you can just make out some of the hedgerows that would be retained, and then to behind the development there's Malvern Vale, so just gives you a bit of context. Here's some more views from the public right of way towards the hills. So this land would be developed, and this is a view from the west of the site looking down towards Malvern Vale from the public right of way. And then this is the north site. So this is development within Malvern Vale, including the school and various 2-3-storey detached and semi-detached and terraced houses. And then Belmont Road, again, another, just to give a bit of context to the type of development in the area. So this is to the south of the site. Okay, so the recommendation is for approval, but it's such that the Director of Planning and Infrastructure is authorised to grant planning permission subject to, firstly, the completion of archaeology and trial trenching and any necessary changes to conditions or plans arising from those results, on the proviso that any substantial material changes to the scheme as a result of findings will require the application to be taken back to committee. This is so that the applicant can have a secure resolution from the committee and then go away, do archaeological investigation, and then this will inform any conditions. And should anything be found as part of those works, we can then consider if any substantial changes are needed to the scheme. And the second point of the recommendation is, following satisfactory of Resolution 1, the completion of a Section 106 Planning Obligation Agreement to secure contributions as set out in Section 9 of the report. And this includes contributions for send provision, highways, junction improvements, as well as SSSI mitigation, as the Natural England and the AONB the National Landscape Team raised concerns in regards to the impact of from the development on recreational pressure. So they've agreed to contribute financially towards this for off-site mitigation. And also we've got contributions for active travel, bus services, the NHS, and other things secured by the Section 106 would be the affordable housing provision, the management and maintenance of public open space. So yes, so that's the recommendation subject to those, as well as the recommendation, the conditions in the officer's report. Thank you.
Thank you, Claire, and well done for getting through all of that. Yes, quite warm. Yeah, we don't have a parish council representative today, so I'll go straight on to Michael Obey, who you're representing, I think, a few residents.
Hi, so I live just on the Cows Farm plot, so just right near where it's all happening. So I just wanted to represent the opinions of myself and just my neighbours who will be directly impacted by the development. We have a few concerns which are around the transport and the ecology. So first for transport, in terms of the plan, it mentions vehicle and cycle access. I think this will be primarily vehicles. So with 200 houses, there'll be 200 plus new cars in the area. That will be an additional burden on Sayers Avenue. So we know that there's going to be structural changes around the exit point, but there's also pressure on the adjacent Belmont Road, which will also be, well, at the moment it's very difficult for pedestrians to make their way through. You have cars half parked on across the pavement, so when I've been through with a suitcase or someone going through with a pram, or even someone elderly or on a mobility device, it'll be very difficult for them to get through Belmont Road as it is at the moment. And then we have to think about the burden of the additional traffic on that area as well. We also haven't seen any evidence of traffic surveys conducted during peak times. So there was one that was done midweek in the middle of the day, but there's a school nearby, so you have people coming and going from work. So it doesn't seem to be any results showing this done at peak times in terms of the traffic assessment. There's also a pretty inconsistent, infrequent and not reliable bus service nearby. So you have the number 44, but it's not one that comes very often or reliably. In terms of local access, both the High Street and the train station are more than a 20-minute walk away. So in terms of pedestrianisation, it's already quite challenging for the elderly and young families to get to and from the site, especially given the elevation that we have here in Malvern. In terms of the ecology, we're bordering on the AONB. We've already mentioned or already heard about the crayfish, and we've also got wildlife that needs protecting as well as the views. But in terms of the impact of people living here at the moment, you've also got the impact of the drainage and the flooding, as we have a day like today to see. So during the rainy season on Cales Farm, the land currently helps drain away excess surface runoff, which is a consideration that's been highlighted previously in the plan. The land gets extremely boggy, and the flood risk assessment has also mentioned issues caused to those in the neighbouring Vale estate. So there was an incident in Sugarloaf Close, which we saw on a map, where there were actually houses that flooded previously due to the inadequate drainage around the area. We saw that there were measurements made in the summer, but the summer is not today, where it's more reflective of what a rainy season would look like. So we just want to make sure that this consideration is taken as seriously as possible. So in conclusion, just to get under 3 minutes, the main issues that I want to bring forward are the exit road access to ensure that the traffic assessment is done at peak times and that needed structural improvements are made, as well as to Sayers Avenue but to Belmont Road as well, to account for additional traffic in the area and to accommodate for pedestrians, and also for the flooding to make sure this is taken as seriously as possible and to ensure that the assessment's undertaken during the wet season. So obviously we prefer the land to be done on brownfield land rather than farmed agricultural land, which we feel takes away from the natural beauty of the Malverns, which is what attracts many people to want to live in the area. Sorry for overrunning.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And could I ask Francesca now, who is the agent on behalf of the applicant? Thank you, Francesca.
Good evening. I'm Francesca Parmenter from David Lock Associates, the agent for the application. Members will be aware that this is a site allocated for residential development in the council's submitted plan. The application should therefore be considered in this positive context. It delivers an important element of the council's strategy for future growth, providing homes, including affordable, as part of a sustainable, high-quality extension to Malvern Town. As explained in our letter to members circulated on Friday, we do understand the landscape context of the site, and we've worked closely with your officers, policy, landscape and ecology for some time to consider the site, its constraints and opportunities, and conceive a scheme that reflects the qualities and the context of the site. The outcome of this collaborative work was an agreement to the parameters for the development site, which you have seen, its access, the extent of built form, the areas of open space and landscape structure, and these are all embedded in the draft policy for the site. And what is before you is an application that delivers on these agreed design parameters and is supported by your officers. The master plan is consciously landscape-led. The landscape and visual assessment has strongly underpinned the development proposals, embedding landscape mitigation as part of an iterative design process that has, in collaboration with your officers, secured 50% of the site as open space, retaining open land to the west of the site, those areas close to Malvern Hills and Mill Coppice, and new areas of structural planting, hedgerows, rows and tree groups to soften development parcels. So the application demonstrates how the development minimises impacts on the landscape as required by the NPPF, and this is a conclusion that has been reached by your officers. This is a sustainable site close to Malvern Town in walking and cycling distance from local amenities. Public rights of way border the site and create opportunities to integrate the new development into the surrounding network and open up an amenity resource for new and existing residents. Environment Agency and local lead flood have endorsed the flood risk assessment and drainage strategy and confirm it's acceptable from a flood risk perspective. Habitat and protected species surveys have informed mitigation measures, and conditions have been proposed to secure these, and a net gain in biodiversity will be delivered. The proposals before you for 200 dwellings are in full accordance with every aspect of policy SWDPR 55. Section 106 contributions will be secured for community leisure, sports within Malvern, SEND primary and secondary schools, primary care services and highways mitigation as identified by the county, including the junction design and off-site contributions, including improvements to bus services. So we respectfully encourage members to support their officer's recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you, Francesca. That was just about 3 minutes as well, so you've both done well tonight. Okay, so just before I call on the ward members, I'm just going to make clear that I'm not going to accept any proposals until we've heard the whole of the member debate tonight. So if you could hang fire, that'd be great. So in terms of ward members, Councillor Rain, I think you want to go first.
Thank you, Chair. I was asked to go first. Thank you. Well, I first want to repeat my declaration that I chair the Joint Advisory Committee of the Malvern Hills National Landscape, formerly the AONB, and the executive body of this having, as you've heard, as you know, submitted strong objections to this application on grounds of potential negative impact on the national landscape, including views from the hills. And I should also repeat my declaration, I think, that I'm a board member of Malvern Hills Trust, which I understand has also submitted comments. But tonight, of course, I'm speaking as one of two ward councillors, Natalie McVeigh and myself, for West Ward, in which this application arises. It's probably fair to say that I have for quite a number of years now rather come to terms with the idea of development on this site. Indeed, I'm pleased to say that I'm somewhat relieved with the scale and form of development that is proposed now in this outline application before us this evening. 200 homes, not the 400 that was talked about for a long while previously. I particularly welcome the fact that the planned attenuation ponds plan to be located on the northern boundaries, the northern boundaries of the site. Inevitably so, of course, because of the slope of the field, but also because that would provide a significant barrier or break in the development between what is proposed now and the existing housing on the existing Malvern Vale site adjacent. And I also welcome the opportunity that proposal potentially creates for greater viability for the excellent community facilities that Malvern Vale already enjoys: the primary school, which I'd served as a governor for several years, the community centre, which I often use, and the supermarket that I also occasionally visit. It will be great for these investments, these facilities, to have a wider catchment area. And I particularly welcome the avoidance of additional pressure on the already rather narrow network of existing unadopted roads next door in Malvern Vale. I always felt they haven't been adopted because they didn't meet county council expectations on standards, but more pressure on those roads would be, I think, a problem too far. while I have, of course, always had considerable reservations about the loss of more open farmland on the periphery of our town and about the inevitably negative implications of this development, it's in relation to the views from the top of the Malvern Hills. On balance, and given that this development is, of course, no surprise and has been long expected to come forward, I think that we have before us tonight the basis of an outline application of something that ticks enough of the right boxes for me, especially given our parlour's position regarding housing numbers vis-à-vis the development plan. So accordingly, right now I feel minded to support this outline application, but especially given the rather different perspective and detail points strongly made by the National Landscapes team, I'll also be very interested to hear what others in this room tonight have to say and are thinking before making up my mind finally. And I'll stop there, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rain. And if I could turn to Councillor McVeigh now.
Thank you, Chair. So as others have explained, we're here this evening to consider our outline planning application with all matters reserved apart from the formation of the access for the 200 dwellings. So if approved tonight, lots of further decisions will obviously need to be made. I wanted to thank officers for delivering the members' briefing for us and for arranging the site visit and obviously putting together these comprehensive papers, and to Hallam Land Management for holding a public consultation event last year, which was attended by over 50 people, most of whom were residents, for liaising closely with our officers. And I understand that there's been a great deal of discussion and compromise to get us where we are today. John's just mentioned the reduction from 400 proposed dwellings to 200. Thank you also to members of the public who've joined us and who've spoken this evening to share their views, and I acknowledge and agree with many of the points raised. It's true to say the site's been identified as a development site since before I became a councillor in 2017. So as John said, people have been getting used to this proposal. And to some extent, pretty much every decision that comes before us at committee is regarded as contentious in one way or another, with some people in favour and some people not in favour. And that's the nature of the planning process, and we must take these views very seriously. So I've carefully listened to the views of the public speakers and to my fellow councillor this evening so far, and I'm looking forward to hearing the views of my fellow committee members before making my mind up and potentially making a proposal, but I would like to reserve the right to speak later if I wish to. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. I'm going to open it up now to questions and points of... oh, Neville's ready to do his hand up. Questions and points of clarification, Neville. Thank you.
When examining this application, there were a number of reports in there from various people, and one that particularly attracted my attention was one by Natural England. They have lodged a very strong objection to this application, and if you'll permit me, I will just quote from their document. The objection, as we consider it, will have a significant impact on the purposes of designation of the Malvern Hills area of outstanding natural beauty. In addition, further information is required to determine impacts on designated sites. As submitted, the application could have potential significant effects on the Malvern Hills site of special scientific interest. Natural England requires further information in order to determine the significance of these impacts and the scope for mitigation. Without this information, Natural England may need to object to the proposal in regard to Malvern Hills SSI. I have here their offering, 11 pages, if anyone wants to read the detail. Thank you very much, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Mills. Councillor Driscoll.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to the speakers. I suppose my questions relate to both the visual impact of the scheme from the top of the hills, because it is quite a significant visual impact, and the proposed kind of landscaping works. As I understand it, this is kind of outline at the moment, and more detailed landscaping plans will be provided, as I understand it. I'd like to see clarification on that. I'm always a little bit nervous. It's great to see a scheme with 50% informal open space, informal recreation space, but it's what you do with that space to ameliorate certainly the visual impacts from the Malvern Hills, how that will provide buffer zones to the brook, and particularly the SSSI. I think I would like to see a little bit more detail in terms of the detail of the landscaping plan. So, for example, on the illustration shown in front of us, we have a big field of informal recreation space. I don't know if that's just going to be open grassland. Is there going to be opportunity for more significant tree planting? I believe there's opportunities within this development for much more significant tree planting, both within those informal recreation spaces and actually street scene tree planting within the development itself, just to break up the impact of that development visually from both the hills and other aspects of the developments. All this stuff looks great on paper, but often when I see these new developments in practice, they're far from what they look like on paper. And I think there are real opportunities to improve the kind of biodiversity net gain. And whilst it's better than some landscaping schemes I've seen it outline, I actually think, given the visual impact of that scheme, much more could be done visually through things like tree planting, creation of wildflower meadows, orchard creation, a little bit more inspirational landscaping is what I'm getting at here. Maybe a question is, are we expected to see those plans in the more detailed phase? And I know this application isn't subject to the biodiversity net gain 10% because it was pre the cut-off date, but I would certainly like to see this development significantly improve the biodiversity and visual impacts, particularly within development as well as within that kind of wider countryside. You know, I would hate for it just to be a green field that's mowed every 2 weeks. Might be useful for recreation, but it may be not as useful for biodiversity.
I'm just going to ask Claire to respond to the question about trees and greenery and biodiversity and etc. Because I know we've discussed this actually, haven't we, on site as well?
Thank you, Chair. The landscape mitigation strategy, which is shown above, as well as the development framework plan, they're included as plans for approval, but to be so that any reserved matters coming forward would be broadly in accordance with those. And this is because we want to see the hedgerows and trees retained in what is the characteristic settlement, the field pattern, and this is considered appropriate for the landscape type, which is principal timbered farmlands. So whilst we are broadly content with those, we also recognise that a lot more detail needs to come forward as part of any reserved matters. The recommendation does include requirements for a biodiversity enhancement scheme, which also demonstrates biodiversity net gain through calculations. A more detailed scheme of landscaping, which would include details of species and amounts, that kind of thing, as well as a landscape enhancement management plan, so to ensure that going forward everything's maintained. Also, as part of any reserve matters, we're asking for arboricultural method statements and tree protection. So yes, whilst this is, we're looking for something to come forward broadly in accordance with this, we can secure further details going forward which would enhance biodiversity and provide more detailed landscaping. Thank you.
Can I just ask, does that come back to committee?
So it wouldn't automatically necessarily come back to committee, but it would be through the normal referral process. So depending on whether we received objections, etc., whether it was then referred to ward members to come back. But some reassurance in terms of the details that have to be submitted. It's not they're conditioned, but they're conditioned to be submitted in terms of landscaping and a number of other matters. They're conditioned to be submitted with that first reserve matters. So they are part of that sort of application rather than a discharge of condition application, which wouldn't be subject to any referral to members or any potential referral. So I think that's quite important as well. So it goes through the necessary procedure, but it's about the public interest at that time. I mean, you might assume that it may well end up at committee, but of course we can't prejudge that at this stage.
Thank you, Kieran. I've got Christine was next.
Thank you, Chair. I think Councillor Driscoll has raised my biodiversity point, so I won't speak of those again. I'm very familiar with this area because I used to live near here and I have been a West Ward councillor in the past, but my children went to Northleigh School as well. So I've stood on the bottom of Broadlands Drive gossiping quite a substantial amount of time. And I'm very familiar with the traffic flows, especially with Belmont Road. And yesterday I went on a site visit and I was reminded of these traffic flows, which are much worse than they used to be. And I take your point that you rose. And I'm concerned about the change in the layout of the road and its effect on Belmont Road, because Belmont Road has on-street parking. As you said, pushchairs can't get through, people who've got disabilities, children walking home from school. I've been through all of that and campaigned many years ago about someone changing that, so I recognise that. So I'm very concerned about that access that's proposed. I've tried to think of it in my mind whether it could be done in a better way, but there's certainly going to be a massive impact that can back up onto Broadlands and Belmont. The other point I was going to raise was, you said there are a lot of amenities, but there aren't any NHS amenities and people have to travel through to Malvern Link, the retail park around there, and I'd like to see some form of NHS doctors type of amenity there to serve that community.
I'll just ask Claire to respond, Christine.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so firstly, in regards to the highways issues and the proposed changes to provide the new access, I'm aware that the applicant was in discussions with the Highways Authority when the site was initially put forward as part of the emerging plan, and they have also been in discussions since the submission of this application. So in that respect, I feel like it probably has been very thoroughly considered by Highways, and the solution that they've come up with is likely to be the best that they can, really. also, Highways have not objected to what's put forward, and the access is a matter that we have to consider at this point. And we have no technical objections to that access. Do you want to add
Well,
anything?
I was just going to add really that in the Highways response, they've said in their conclusions that they've undertaken a robust assessment of the planning application, and based on the analysis of the information submitted, the Highway Authority concludes that there would not be a severe detrimental impact on local highway network, and therefore they raised no objection. And the point about the severe comment is that that is the benchmark that you have to reach. Something has to be severe in highway terms to result in an objection on highway terms. So it can't just be bad. It has to be a severe. So that could be a danger in terms of highway safety, or it could be a severe in terms of delays and queuing, that kind of thing. They've assessed those matters and they don't consider it to reach that benchmark. So I think so. Just to be clear as well, we're not necessarily saying it's going to be the best solution ever, but ultimately it doesn't reach the benchmark to be unsuitable and and severe. And it is it's always going to be difficult, I think, in this location about getting the right balance. And I think, given the amount of time and the discussions that I know have been had with Highways, this is the solution that's on the table, and it's taken a lot of time to reach this point. Obviously, members need to assess whether they believe it to be the right approach, but we have a technical consultee that's advising us that it's acceptable in technical terms, and that's the advice.
In regards to NHS, I am aware that they have requested a contribution which the applicant has agreed to, so that will go towards local NHS services. We don't have any more details in regards to that.
Thank you, Claire. I've got Paul next. Councillor Bennett.
Hello. Encroachment towards the hills. The objections from the National Landscapes Association, our local version of it, and Natural England, just highlight the fact that is there any protection left? We should be a national park here. If we were, we might have a bit more. Is there any protection being a national landscape for the views from and to the hills? I don't know whether I have confidence in that anymore. As far as I'm concerned, that's the primary consideration here. And as far as I'm concerned, nothing here is going to mitigate that. Everybody's trying to suggest that it will, but it won't. And I'm sorry, from my point of view, as far as from what I've seen and listening to all the arguments here, those objections should carry a lot more weight than anything else. And really, we need to look at our plan. If we're going to allow this to happen, where's it going to stop? When you get to the national landscape boundary, right the way around the hills, it's not happening on the Herefordshire side because the towns don't quite go that far. And we're just chipping away at something that we should never chip away at because we can never get it back.
Thank you, Councillor Bennett. Did you want to make a comment, Claire, or Kieran? You don't need to if you don't want to.
Yeah, I'd just say, yes, there is going to be landscape harm. It's unavoidable, and the developer can mitigate that in part, but they're never going to mitigate it in full in terms of having a new housing development on a greenfield site. So that's something that has to be considered in the planning balance.
Could I just say that the work that has been done is brilliant, but it's still, as far as I'm concerned, just doesn't quite do it.
Thank you. I think a lot of us know this site quite well. I mean, I actually look down on it from West Malvern Road, so I see it every day. But it is quite a difficult balance, as you say. And Malvern hasn't got very many sites that can be developed. So, you know, this is the position we get ourselves in now. Jenny, Councillor Watkins.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I wanted to bring the conversation back to the concerns that were raised by the residents, as Councillor Wild had started. And I'm very conscious that Mr. Obi spoke very eloquently on behalf of residents that have come and given their time to give their voice and an opinion to this process. And I think whilst I didn't get a wild dissent from understanding, some of the challenges about the need for housing and, the sensitivities around the site, there were a couple of questions I think embedded in that which we probably haven't fully answered and really deserve a response. So I think Councillor Wilde spoke about her experience of understanding that site, as would our residents living there, and I'm sure the ward councillors would concur. And I've heard Kieran's response in terms of that desktop assessment done by Highways, in effect, based on what was submitted. But I'm very conscious that Mr. Obi spoke of the fact that that assessment was done at a non-peak traffic time. And actually, if you went there at 3:20, like most schools that we all as councillors have in our patch, that would it reach the severe threshold? Maybe not. But the point is that obviously we recognise that it is going to have an impact on Belmont Road and other areas around it. And I don't know the area at all. So I'm just conscious we also have the agent in the room, and I'm aware that residents were concerned that assessment wasn't really done to reflect accurately the position that an extra 200 plus cars would have at certain times of day, whether that could be taken back on board to have another look at. And like you say, there may not be a better scheme, but I think that does need to be factored in. And I guess the other point, which was around development and the displacement of water, and genuine concerns from residents that, is what's being proposed adequate based on the fact that the assessment was done when it was dry. And again, I think living in Malvern, we all know what happens. I had to take a very long route to get here from rural Longdon. So, I think, again, that potentially should at least be discussed here by officers and potentially took back to have another look at.
Thank you, Councillor Watkins. Claire, Kieran, did you want to come back on that?
We're just looking at the the transport assessment that was submitted, just to see, because there is details of when the surveys were done, but it's obviously quite technical detail, so I don't want to give you the wrong information as well. But they will have done a range and looking at those peak times, so it should have captured those things. But I'm just looking for confirmation, so I'm able to offer some reassurance around that, rather than just what they should have done. What's in the appendix C? So, do you mind repeating the other points? Because I think I got sidetracked on highways, trying to look at this at the same time. I'm not good at multitasking.
It was, flooding and drainage.
Flooding and drainage.
Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. So, I mean, in terms of the flooding and drainage matters, they are really to be dealt with as part of any reserve matters, because we've got a high-level assessment, essentially, from the Lead Local Flood Authority, who confirmed that there isn't any objection in principle, but there does need to be a detailed drainage scheme to be submitted and agreed and approved, and that will include, it must include SUDS features which ensure that water runoff is minimised, so it's no greater than greenfield runoff rate plus a percentage to account for climate change. So that's the sort of standard at that point, and I think it would be difficult really from that perspective to delve into that too much, because we will get those technical details at the later stage, and it may be that they're not acceptable at later stage, but it's probably, I think we've got reassurance from the Lead Local Flood Authority that in principle there should be a solution there. The what we consider today in terms of the principle and the highway and the access points, that's something we would be approving in terms of that access and whether that's acceptable solution or not. So we'll just see whether we can get more information. And the point about the severe point, and that's what is in the NPPF in terms of the benchmark, just why I sort of referred to that point. So that is quite a high benchmark to meet, but it doesn't, you quite rightly are scrutinising that element. And in terms of sort of the other key aspects, in terms of agreeing the principle, ultimately, if the landscape harm is something that is known and acknowledged as part of this development, I think officers have been clear that there are harms in those regards. So it is a matter of trying to balance those. Ultimately, it's included as part of the emerging plan, and it's within that as an emerging allocation, and that does carry some weight, but quite limited weight at this stage because we're still not an examination. So that's something that members need to consider. But so there's quite a few factors. I think we might need just a minute if everyone doesn't mind.
Just say, because Councillor Rain wanted to make another point, so if we let Councillor Rain speak and then I'll come back to you. Councillor Rain.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, while we're on highways, the implications of, remember, the Malvern Vale development were thought about in relation to all the way up Newtown Road and the junction with Worcester Road. And at the time, I remember the judgment was it wasn't too much of a problem. I would say over the last 10 years, it has become an increasing problem. The amount of traffic that's coming from not just Malvern Vale, but from that corner of the town. And I just wonder whether perhaps at an outline stage it's not the right moment, but I think consideration needs to be given for the away effects of traffic that's another 200 houses will develop. And I think there will need to be some changes, significant changes at the other end of Newtown Road. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rain. Are you?
Do you mind if I haven't got the answer on the because I think it might be dangerous to try and speculate on this, but I think to move matters forward, I think my assumption would be that it is looked at over a period of time. That's usual, and they collect that traffic data in terms of movements with the things you would have seen on the road that are normally in place for permanently for a number of weeks, whatever is agreed with highways. But I think if members were content, there could still be that. We've got to delegate for a number of matters. You could still delegate in consultation with the local ward members to look into that matter, confirm that that is the case and that it has covered a period of time. And if the local ward members were happy, that would allow us to delegate. If not, we'd bring it back to, if members were minded to approve, we'd have to bring it back to committee. And of course, that might change the recommendation, of course. Similarly to the archaeological point, that if that isn't a straightforward point and has knock-on effects, we would be returning that to planning committee. So I think hopefully that will give us a way forward on that, because we did request highways presence tonight, but they weren't available, unfortunately. And I really wouldn't want to give you the wrong technical information here. So I think that might be the better route if members are content with that.
Thank you, Kieran. We might come back to that later. Councillor Gallagher.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And thanks to the officer for a pretty comprehensive report on this. So that's well done on that. On the question of a couple of things, actually, on the archaeology side of things that you mentioned at the beginning or earlier, there is anecdotal stories, shall we say, about Roman villas in the area. And I've actually heard it from a builder who said that he was on a site over there where it was covered over. They dug it up and then they covered it. So the big issue there is on these trenches that will be dug, 4% of the area or whatever. And I think it's good that that's actually been done. The question then goes on to, well, if they find something, what happens then? It comes back and we have to sort of remodify that outline, see what's permissible. But since it's 4% and since the area is unknown, if outline planning permission is given, and they do then start, so that the trench is dug and it seems all right, once they start building, is there any oversight of the building that there is subsequently some area that they haven't actually dug a trench on that does actually show something? Is there any cover that we can have for that? So that's one part of it. And the other is, if we were to pass this outline planning tonight, what sort of time scale is the developer proposing to actually put together what they're going to put on the site, and when would they then propose to start developing it, and when would they when, if they have a plan, would they actually propose to finish it?
Thank you. I think Kieran's going to probably have a go at answering those, aren't you, Kieran?
Yeah, well, I'll start with the archaeological one, and I mean, in terms of the proposal or the recommendation from officers, it is to allow for that trenching to take place and those results to basically inform what happens next. So it's our archaeologist is suggesting a 4% trenching, which is actually quite a big area on a site. It's more scientific than that still, because there's areas that are of more interest. So you narrow it down further into areas where you actually would locate do the trenching, and then that ultimately would give an indication of whether there's any issues, any showstoppers, anything else like that. Or not, and if there wasn't, then it would mean that we could move forward and issue a planning permission. If there was, then it's either likely it could rule out development, it could rule out developments in areas, and therefore there could be some more significant changes, and then that would result in it coming back to committee and possibly a revised scheme and something else in front of you. We'd have to see what the consequences of that would. If it was deemed that actually there wasn't any significant issues demonstrated as part of the trial trenching, then we'd move forward, but we would be looking usually to put on additional conditions depending on what the survey showed and if there was still potential on site, which, given that there is interest in that area, and like you said, it's only 4%, the normal conditions would include something like a watching brief, which is really where you have an archaeologist on site watching the excavation works of the land, and that's an extra catch basically, so a qualified person watching that. If they note anything or any areas of interest, then they essentially stop work and go and look at it, and then either do further works or not. So that's normally dealt with by like a tiered condition, and then if something's found, then there's a part of that condition triggers a number of other steps, including recording and etc. etc. So there is a mechanism which would likely happen, but until we've done the first stage, we haven't actually now formalise those conditions, but our archaeologist will be involved in that whole process and advising us on that all the way through. So that's that part. In terms of the sort of timing of it, the reserve matters it's a 2-year so there's a condition requiring reserve matters to be submitted within 2 years. So within 2 years, we should have the first reserve matters showing us the outline and all that, the bits that we don't have the answers to today. And then they have a further window following the approval of the reserve matters to then implement, which is normally another 3 years. So I think is that correct still? So therefore, that's when the development must have started within a period of overall 5 years, and then it will be built out over that. So it might start in they could do reserve matters tomorrow if they got if they got approval and build out, or they could do reserve matters at the end of the 2-year period, and as long as it's made, that keeps it going, and then once that's approved, they get another 3 years to actually implement on site. So that's sort of the time frames. One of the reasons we've looked to shorten the length of time, so normally it's slightly longer, the standard condition, but because part of the weight that we're giving this is to meet the current lack of housing supply. So as a result of that, we've said, well, in that case, if you're trying to meet now, we're bringing that forward and making it a shorter period of time. But it is an outline, so it won't come forward any much quicker than that, and we have to be reasonable about what that. So hopefully that helps.
Thank you, Kieran. Councillor McVeigh, you want to come back? I've got Councillor Victory at the back, so I'll take Councillor Victory first.
Thank you, Chair. I think as local councillors, we always have great reservations about any development in the area. And as people have said, this is a very sensitive area and a sensitive development. But we have to be practical, to my mind, because taking as a start point the the area between the hills and the development, which is being allowed as open space, green infrastructure. There's no reason why this couldn't be, I was thinking of Councillor Driscoll earlier, it could be sown with rattle so that the grass is suppressed and it can become a wildflower meadow. You also have significant areas of open space, and there will be problems with traffic, but there will always be problems with traffic. It's one of those things. If we all continue to use cars and there are more and more of us, then the traffic gets greater and we park on the roads so there's less space to go through. It's part of living in the 21st century, I'm afraid. And this has been included in the South Worcestershire Development Plan for years. It's no surprise that a development is coming up here. And to my mind, a development here, limited with green space towards the hills, between the, you can see it on the screen there, between the developed areas, it's not going to make a significant difference. And we have to think of the housing supply. We desperately need to have more housing. The government, it will be driving it like crazy, and our powers of resisting get fewer and fewer. I think if we turn this down, it would go to appeal and it would be turned down. This all sounds very negative, but overall, I would say that this is a very balanced development in a sensitive area, much less than the original proposal, and it really is the best that we can hope for. So that's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Victory. Councillor McVeigh.
Sorry, it's been a really interesting discussion tonight, actually. It's covered a lot of the things that I wanted to mention, but I thought I'd just speak from the perspective as the county councillor for the area. And Belmont Road has been problematic since before I was representing the area, and for a long time I've been requesting that perhaps it was made a one-way system, for example. But County Council haven't taken that on board tonight. I think it is unfortunate they're not here to answer some of these questions tonight. So actually, Kieran, I'm really content with your suggestion that in consultation with John and I, Councillor Wren and I, that we potentially bring back any highways issues back to committee. I echo the concerns about public transport, which have been raised by residents and the county council as a concern, which is interesting. And all I can say is that I'll continue to pressure the county council and the bus providers and the current providers to reinstate the 44 service, which was so dramatically cut, well, axed, you could say, actually, a few years ago. So I thought it would help if I added those kind of commitments from my perspective as county. But yeah, really interesting discussion. All of the other things I wanted to raise around biodiversity and species and habitat have actually been covered. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor McVeigh. I don't see anybody else's hands up, so in which case I'm going to ask for a proposer.
Okay, it's me again. So yeah, I having listened really carefully, and it has been interesting, as I said, I'm of the mind to conclusion that the positive impacts associated with the development outweigh the negative impacts, and I would much rather that we determine our own applications than be at the mercy of developments forced on us by the government. We do need more housing in the Malvern Hills, particularly smaller dwellings with various affordable tenures, and I believe it's the right site for these dwellings, so I would like to recommend approval in line with officers' recommendations. Thank you.
So I have a proposal. Have I got a seconder? Councillor Rain?
Happy to second, Chair.
Thank you. So Kieran, could you, sorry. Yeah, okay. Could you just do the conclusion for us, please, with all the bits that you're going to add in, I'm sure?
Yes, so it is recommended for approval in accordance with, so to delegate to the Director of Planning and Infrastructure in accordance with the officer recommendation and the update sheet, and in terms of the highway matter, to confirm and confer with the local ward members in regards to the transport assessment and the information in that to ensure that survey works were done over a broad period of time, and ensure that that's agreed. If that's not agreed, and the ward members will can then have the option to redirect this back to planning committee.
Okay, so we're happy to move to the vote then now, Kieran and Claire? Yep, okay. Could I ask Jenny then to move to the vote, please?
I don't know if I can make a comment about potential of adding something else in, or is that not the... It was just about the kind of detailed landscaping plan, whether that can also come back
So
to ward members and be referred to committee if necessary.
Okay, I think I'll take that. It's quite important. Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. It's a reserve matter, isn't it?
We have to leave that to the process, really.
Yeah.
It will be consulted on.
Yeah.
When it comes
Yeah. Yeah, because we'll get the detailed landscape plans anyway, won't we? Yeah. So is that okay, Councillor Driscoll? It'll come back anyway in terms of the detail. Okay. Jenny, can you move to the vote then, for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. So all of those in favour of the motion to approve the application in line with officers' recommendations, please raise your voting cards. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those against? 3. Any abstentions? 1. Motion's therefore carried to approve the application. Thank you.
I can tell by the emotions in the room that it's been a really difficult decision.